Welcome to another episode of Brand Lincoln, where we take a look around the Lincoln, Nebraska area and introduce you to business owners and influential people in the city. We are brought to you by Perch Merch. Perch Merch is a locally owned, custom screen printing and embroidery apparel shop that also specializes in vehicle wraps, decals, and all sorts of promotional products. If your business, school, or team is looking to expand your brand, head to perch-merch.com or call us at 402-217-5212.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Brand Lincoln. I am your host, Chris Beecham. I'm joined by my co-host, Henry Schmidt.
Hi, Chris.
And producer extraordinaire, Joe Cruth.
Hello.
I added extraordinaire this time.
That was nice. So, yeah, really good.
Great word choice.
Yeah. Before we introduce our guest, just want to ask everybody to listen or not listen.
We do want people
to listen, Chris.
Chris,
we
good,
do.
Good job.
Before we introduce our guest, I just want to remind everybody to please like, follow, subscribe on whatever platform you're listening on. You can also find us on TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube at Brand Lincoln Podcast. So today in the Perch Merch studio, we have Mark from Project Healing Waters. Hi, Mark.
Hi there.
So, okay.
I don't get extraordinaire.
The extraordinary.
Well,
Mark,
hey, let him do the
darn
podcast
it.
first, and then we'll decide.
Yeah. Okay, Project Healing Waters. I know nothing of what it actually is, so explain that first.
Sure. So basically what Project Healing Waters is, we are a national nonprofit that provides non-clinical physical therapy, physical recreational therapy for any disabled veteran or injured service member. And it's centered around fly fishing. So the 5 cores of fly fishing education, fly rod building, fly tying, casting, and then we take people out and we fish with them.
So ground up fly fishing. Like if you know nothing at all about fly fishing, you can teach them.
Yes. Yep. I started in 2018 and I knew nothing. I mean, maybe less than nothing. So
negative.
Yeah.
Where do you go fly fishing at?
So that's an interesting thing in Nebraska. We are not a big trout destination. We have some trout water, but every warm water fish in Nebraska, save the paddlefish, can be fished with a fly rod.
Okay.
So walleye, carp, gar, if it swims and eats things, you can fish with a fly rod for it.
Because the extent of me fishing is, like wagon train when I was a Cub Scout.
Yep.
So I really know nothing.
Yeah, I'm not much of a fisherman myself either.
I don't have the patience for it.
I don't know how to fish at all, to be honest.
Well, you still take Joe, even though. So, how did Project Healing Waters come about?
So in 2005, our founder, Ed Nicholson, is a retired Navy captain, and he's back east, and he sees, guys in the big, medical, like Bethesda Medical Facility, being treated, and it occurs to him that he could take those guys out fishing as part of their physical rehabilitation. And that was like the initial idea, and not very much longer, he spawned this national thing, and now it's in 48 states. We have 183 programs nationwide, and
Oh, wow.
yeah. So it's one of those things that was just a great idea. Somebody had to have it, and then it just exploded. So.
Huh. Okay. So how
does someone get into Project Healing Waters as a member? Is that what you call them?
So we have like 2 statuses. We have volunteers, which are either service or non-service members that want to volunteer with our program, or participants, which are all of our veterans that are actually participating in the program. And they can both get on. We have a national website, projecthealingwaters.org, and there's a link there for volunteer or for participant, depending on the status you want to join. You can sign up there. They can email me. I talk to people all the time. Like when I'm out fishing, I always have cards handy because people just walk up to you and ask, how can I either participate or how can I help out or volunteer or whatever. So. But yeah, we have a national web presence that they can get on, or they can contact me directly, and I can send them that link.
So what's your guys' main fundraisers, or how do you get this to operate?
So we fundraise on like a bunch of levels. Nationally, we have some pretty big donors that just want to give to a veterans organization, and we have 2 destination trips that are essentially donated to us. The Freedom Ranch for Heroes up in Wise River, Montana, and Oakhart Lodge in Baldwin, Michigan, both provide week-long trips for veterans with multiple days of guided fishing for free. They just give it to Healing Waters, and we give it, we send vets. We get some grants. The VA gives us a grant, Veterans Administration, because we do provide physical therapy for folks, even though it's not clinical. I mean, we take, injured veterans out, we fish with them, and it's beneficial. So we get that. And then locally, we have some donors. Like in Lincoln specifically, two of our partnerships that are really helpful. The Cornersker Fly Fishers has a side account just for veterans that they fundraise for, and then they donate that money for services or things we need or trips. We took a guy to Casper, Wyoming last year for a 2-day fishing trip. They paid the entire bill. And then the Nebraska Innovation Studio actually has a veterans program called Veterans in Recovery. And that's largely focused on like wood crafts around like small lathe turning projects. But they extended it to include Healing Waters, and they provide us with fly rod kits, access to the shop, and materials to turn cork handles out of for fly rods. So that's been super good for us too. And then we'll just get calls like, hey, some relative left me a bunch of fly fishing gear I don't need, or hey, some relative wanted to leave money in their will to a veterans organization, we found your name. So we get things like that too. And we'll take all of it. I mean, the more I receive in donations, the more I can send straight back out to veterans. And so, I mean, I would love to take a veteran someplace really cool every weekend. I've got the volunteer base for it now, so if we had the money, we would do that for sure.
When you do these big trips, are you meeting up with a bunch of other Healing Water Project Healing Waters from around the country, or is it just like the Lincoln branch that's going?
So it depends on the trip. The national destination trips, Wise River, Montana, and Baldwin, Michigan, those are normally all the region that we're in is the Heartland region. So that's Nebraska, Kansas, Arkansas, Missouri, and Oklahoma. It'd be veterans from those states normally going to one location at a time. The stuff that I run locally is either just Lincoln or Lincoln and Omaha veterans. And then Omaha has a regional thing that they host out at Ogallala. It's a carp contest. And they'll draw essentially all the adjoining states will send people for that and go fish carp for a couple of days. Which, I mean,
Chris, you know how good carp is, right?
Yeah.
I do not. Okay. I stay away from most fish.
It's not the best tasting fish, but some people, pickling it is what I've heard is the way to go.
Yeah. Well, and they may not be sexy to look at, but they're pretty fun to catch.
They do. They fight. They're slimy, but they fight.
Huh. So for around here, you said like on a weekend you take them. So what's a weekend trip consist of? Like,
well, normally we would just do we'd set up a 1-day thing. We'd meet at a lake, give them a start time, a stop time. Depending on how many people show up and how big of a deal we want to make, sometimes there's a group out of Omaha, the Society of American Military Engineers. They'll provide a meal if we ask them. So we could have like a picnic lunch or whatever. But it can be as little as just meet a guy at a lake and fish with them. And fly fishing's pretty instruction intensive at first. So usually if I fish with somebody the first time, I like to just go one-on-one someplace and, pick a spot and go, like Holmes Lake or Mahoney State Park or someplace like that.
I didn't know you could fly fish on a lake. I thought it had to be a river.
Yeah.
well, yeah, because you always see people with the waders that go,
Yeah.
Yeah.
like and they're standing out there.
Yeah. Nope. You can fly fish any body of water, really. You can fly fish from boats. I fly fish off a kayak pretty frequently.
No kidding? Just sitting in it?
Yeah. In fact, it's easier to do that in this area than it is to fish with waders because most of our lakes around here have kind of a muddy, silty bottom. And the Platte River, even though it looks sandy, I wouldn't fish this part of the Platte on a bet. I mean, there's not very much safe water up there because of the currents and the how the sand and the silt on the bottom create the bottom substrate.
So what's the physical therapy part of all this?
So there's two, there's been a lot of national studies, but anecdotally for me, what I would tell you is anything that involves a lot of hand-eye coordination, We have I have a vise set up at home that if you only have one hand, you can still tie flies with one hand. So there's a lot of adaptive equipment. There's adaptive casting things for fly rods to hook to either your arm or to your chest if you're missing a hand. But in my case, for example, I had thumb surgery last fall, and getting back the coordination of your hands after that surgery takes some time. And fly rod casting's pretty physical. Getting guys up and down stream banks and wading, in water, all a lot more physical, and I think people give it credit for sometimes. And then I think there's a mental health benefit too that maybe gets underplayed. Back before Vietnam, when veterans came home, they came home in big groups, and they all went and they joined the VFW or the American Legion, and they hung out with their buddies and they swapped war stories. Beginning in Vietnam, people started coming back one at a time, and they didn't have that connection with their community when they came back. So this is another, it's one of the things where you can get with a group of people that are that have like experiences.
That camaraderie.
Yeah. And that communication too, because if you need a service from the VA, but you don't know how to get it, there's probably somebody. If you get 100 vets together, somebody's going to know the answer. So I think that's beneficial. And for me personally, it is such a concentration-intensive sport. When you're fishing, you're focused on the current, the wind, the line, what the fish are doing. There's all this stuff that keeps you in the moment. If you're tying flies, you can't think about when your taxes are due. You've got 6 pieces of feather that you're trying to hold on to a hook while you're spinning a thread around it. There's no time for those other thoughts to creep in. And so it's a great reset button, I think.
Yeah, maybe I should try it.
Yeah.
You do need a hobby, Chris.
Yeah. Well, podcasting is my current hobby. It takes up some time. Okay, so how did you get involved with this, Mark? What's your story?
Yeah.
Are you a veteran too, Mark?
I am. I served in the National Guard and Air Force. I did a combination of services for 33 years. Retired in 2016. In 2018, I was at the VFW in Waverly, and they had an event called Operation Engage America, which was a woman from Iowa that was doing a national anti-suicide thing. And she would bring together service providers and entertainment and meals. Well, we had this event in Waverly on a Wednesday over the lunch hour, and there were no vets that showed up. Literally, I opened the door, and I was the only veteran in the room. And I don't know if that was a work conflict thing or the time of day, or it wasn't advertised well enough. But at any rate, I decided to, got to make the rounds and tell everybody, hey, thanks for getting, out here and supporting vets. And the last people I talked to that day were the Project Healing Waters guys. Funny true story, the second to the last person was doing tarot card readings for PTSD vets.
Oh.
And tarot card reading.
Did you get yours read?
Yeah.
Good news? Bad news?
They're like, you're going to be really interested in fishing soon.
The verdict's still out, because the future's unknown. But so the last guys were doing fly rod building and fly tying, and I was talking to them, and I thought this would be a great thing to volunteer for because I love the outdoors. I like fishing. I didn't know anything about fly fishing. And Gene Svensson, the guy that was in charge of the Lincoln program at the time, said, well, you should be a participant for a while and learn how to fly fish. And then you could volunteer and not look, ridiculous. So I did. I did it for a year. They sent me to Kodiak Island, Alaska to fish for a week.
Oh, wow.
Oh, okay. Well, there's that.
Yeah.
That's a little
Maybe I
super
could
cool.
sign up then, too.
Yeah, I built 3 fly rods in my first year. I went to Ogallala for their carp tournament. And on the drive back from that, a year after I started, Gene looked across at me and he said, hey, are you ready to volunteer? And I said, sure. And he goes, great, you're the program lead. So, which it hit a kind of a funny time because that's right at the beginning of COVID. And that's right when Project Healing Waters decided to put everything online. And so they went from email trains to track stuff and manual spreadsheets to everything's in Salesforce. So it was a good time to transition because I didn't know how easy Gene had it before I took it over. Life was just simpler when people filled out things on paper. But it worked out fine, and we've grown back pretty good since then. We don't have the same numbers we had nationally. We probably lost 4,000 members over that period just for loss of contact. And the veteran population is always aging. Your youngest Korea War vets right now are 90. So, at some point they're going to not be able to fish. So.
Yeah.
What's the age range you look like for one of those trips, like to Michigan?
The Michigan trip, I think the youngest guy we set up there was probably mid-30s, and the oldest guy was in their 70s. So, and that's pretty typical. I mean, usually the people we send on national trips are post-service, so they've got at least 4 years of service, and in some cases a lot of service. But all the way back, the trip I went on earlier this year in May, we had Vietnam vets still on the trip, so several of them. So
how many people are kind of on your staff? Is that the right word I would use? Not volunteers,
organization?
But kind of, not just take them out there, but on the inner workings of it all.
So nationally, I mean, it's a small staff. Nationally, it's probably less than 25 people.
Okay. But you are considered one of those staff.
No.
So
I'm just a volunteer.
You aren't?
Yeah.
But a very
time-intensive volunteer.
Yes.
That's true. And so that's and it's tiered just like any organization is tiered. So I'm also the deputy regional coordinator for the Heartland region. So it's kind of all volunteers, and then you have assistant program leads and program leads, and it's all based on how much a volunteer wants to give time-wise and what they want to do. So if you got a lot of time and you want to get on social media and do stuff, there's a way to volunteer more. If you just want to show up when there's a fishing event or you want to help rod building or something like that. I mean, I have volunteers I see once a year. They come out because we need somebody to help set up a picnic or something.
Yeah.
And they'll show up for that. And I've got volunteers that show up 3 times a month. So,
what does the winter look like?
Winter is mostly rod building and fly tying, but we fish all year long.
Okay.
I fished 11 months last year. I fished 12 months the year before that. Our trip to Casper this spring in March, the first day we fished, it was 4 degrees above zero Fahrenheit.
Sounds fun.
Yeah, it was stoic.
Yeah. I wouldn't. No, I'm out.
No.
Trout fishing in Wyoming's a lot of fun. I've gone 3 or 4 times with some friends. Yeah.
I didn't know that about you.
Yeah. Drive like 15 hours, camp super secluded. 10 Sleep, Wyoming is where we go. It's a very small town.
Sounds very Henry.
Is that how are you on a boat or are you on the shore?
You're on a stream, so it's a super windy stream with anywhere from 5 feet wide to 15 feet wide. Trout fishing is pretty strategic in those circumstances.
Is that fly fishing you're doing?
No,
or just,
no.
Okay.
You grab a grasshopper and throw it on a line and let it float. Ew. So kind of like fly fishing.
Okay.
But it's pretty cool to see the fish come up and just wreck the grasshopper, wreck the fly fish.
Nice.
Yeah. So you said you were an outdoorsy guy before this. You were kind of a fisherman or kind of not?
I was a fisherman, but all like spinning rods. And it's funny because one of my first thoughts when I saw the fly fishing rod on the table at the VFW was, hey, if they taught me how to build a fly rod, I could use that for something useful like a spinning rod.
Yeah.
Which seemed like a good going in position, but I haven't touched a spinning rod since the first fly rod I built.
Oh, wow.
I mean, I've literally, I deep sea fished one time with, a deep sea rod, but I have not picked up conventional tackle otherwise since then. So just.
Wow. Just like it that much more then.
Yeah. Well, it is, it becomes like the thing you do. Like if you're a runner, not a jogger, and then all of a sudden you're like, or a runner, not a biker, and all of a sudden you're like, hey, I'm going to start biking to work. Then, maybe that becomes your thing and you're not a runner anymore. You just cycle. Or, you add that and then you decide to swim and become a triathlete or whatever. And those become like, how you do the stuff you do. And so for me with fishing, I had so much luck and experience early on that was good that I just kind of abandoned spin fishing. And, I can build a fly for $1.
Oh, yeah.
And a crankbait's, $5 or $6 now.
And you can snag one of those and lose $6 real fast.
Yeah. Well, or if you hang around when I'm at the lake, I pull them out of trees all the time and just leave them. I find some kid and here you go, buddy. Here's $100 for the crankbaits. And
Because you're not going to use them.
yeah,
Somebody might as well enjoy them.
no, I've got like a tackle box full of dusty crankbaits at home that are going to sit there until my son decides to use them.
So if somebody wants to volunteer, how would they go about it then? Like, say Joe wanted to, well, like you said, you have to learn first, but I mean.
No, actually, that's a misnomer. We take people all the time that can't fly fish.
Okay.
And we teach them how to fly fish. We teach them how to build fly rods. So we'll do from the ground up with volunteers too. And we have volunteers that don't fly fish that just want to come out and like help with like.
I'm sure there's a lot of
organizational
other,
stuff.
logistics to
Yeah.
it.
But same process. They can get a hold of me on my email, or they can get a hold of the national website, and there's a volunteer link. And it'll just, as you drill down through that link, for either volunteers or as a participant, it'll ask you for the region. We're in the Heartland region.
So where were they going? Like, okay, tell them what's the actual website?
Yeah, so it's www.projecthealingwaters.org.
And then what's your email?
And my email is mark.forster@projecthealingwaters.org. And the last name is spelled Forster.
Well, get ready, Mark. You're about to get your email flooded.
Yeah. That's okay. We are largely spread word of mouth, and we'll do like the state fair, and all of a sudden there's 15 new people at a meeting. So, which is
Wow,
awesome.
that's great tracking. Then that's awesome.
We'd love to get a program actually out in central Nebraska. We tried like in that Kearney, Hastings, Grand Island area, but we couldn't get any traction out there. And
That's surprising.
yeah, all we need really to do a program is some sort of a VA clinic. So Scottsbluff would be another target for us down the road, and then a decent volunteer base, and and some water nearby. I mean,
Yeah.
not even great water, but
Well, you said Holmes Lake, so
yeah. Well, I will tell you, like the only walleye I've ever caught came out of Holmes Lake on a fly rod. So there's all kinds of there's guys out there every day bass fishing, like hardcore bass fishing. So it's got fish. I mean. It's not the prettiest lake, but it's got fish.
What would you say your biggest local event is?
The biggest local event is probably the Ogallala. I mean, that's not local to Lincoln. That's local to Nebraska. But the Ogallala carp tournaments are a big thing every year.
How many participants you think you have that?
That is generally 10 participants and 10 volunteers, and then 10 guides. So for that event particularly, because carp's a difficult fish to master. It's a lot harder. It's maybe the smartest fish in North America. I don't think people understand that about carp, but we will bring out professional carp guides who volunteer their time. We have guys that drive from Wisconsin
wow.
to be part of that
And
tournament.
they're a professional carp guide.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so they're out and you can do this. It's just like trout guides or anything else. There's guides that, whatever the water is. So if you're like, I don't know, central Michigan and you're guiding on the Pear Marquette River, what you're fishing for depends on the season. So spring and fall, maybe steelhead. Middle of the summer, going to be largely smallmouth bass and brown trout. But it changes. And so if you have a large carp population, there are people that that's part of their season. Montana, big state for carp, believe it or not. I mean, all the big carp flies come from Montana. So,
Okay then.
yeah, who knew, right?
I did not know any of this. I'm learning. You are teaching me. So,
Chris, do you think you would be able to tell the difference between a carp, a smallmouth bass, and a trout?
I would say I could,
I would like to think I could, but
because the trout's on your hat, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I don't know
and
what
the
a
bass
is on the shirt.
The bass is on the wall that sings.
Yeah.
Correct. Yep.
Yeah.
And then the carp is the one that doesn't look like those two.
Doesn't look like those.
Basically, process of elimination. So, all right, you guys want to ask your
Great apparel, by the way.
Thank you.
He's sporting a terrific hat and shirt that Perch Merch has provided for. So,
Yeah.
Good job, Joe.
Thank you.
Way to plug that.
We're actually kind of getting pretty famous for this hat because nationally the hats are all either cotton dad hats or trucker hats. And when we came here, we wanted the high performance sun hat that wouldn't, sweat stain and whatever. And the 3-color logo, I get calls all the time, and I'm like, I got a guy, I can hook you up.
Nice.
So
Yeah, the new logo is really sharp. I really like how it
Yeah.
looks. So.
nope, we're super happy with the way that's turned out. And we've, you guys have done our shirts for years for the Charles Baswell tournament too. So
Yep, excellent. We appreciate the
yeah.
business.
Oh, you're very welcome.
All right, our final segment here. Since this is Brand Lincoln podcast, we'd like to know what you like to do around the city for fun, besides fishing, and maybe entertainment-wise, if any restaurants you like to visit.
Oh boy. So a couple places like in some of like if somebody comes to Lincoln and they want to go out, we try really, really hard not to take them to anything franchised.
Nice.
Good.
And so some of my favorites are gone. The steakhouse that used to be over on 31st and Adams, gone.
Oh, yeah.
Car lot.
Sadly. But the Parthenon, though, happily has Tuesday night service down at the Hickman Bar and Grill. So you can still get the Parthenon, which is big on our list. We like the Jade Orchid for Thai. We're going to do the El Portal in Waverly this Friday for dinner. So any of the Mazatlan chain of Mexican restaurants,
Yep.
it's kind of a standard for us. And then Ginger for sushi or Hero 88.
Man, you really like
like
the
it.
restaurants.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is great.
That's when you travel in the military, you have two choices. You can eat at Burger King or local. And I ate local everywhere. And, we're looking forward to that. I'm actually leaving for Mongolia later this month. And we're looking forward to seeing what the local fare looks like there.
It's not going to be who hot.
Yeah, no. No, well, maybe Hoo Hot with marmots or something.
Yeah. A little more creative.
Are there any Lincoln businesses that help support you, or do you work with anybody as like a partnership thing for that sort of stuff? Or
the primary one right now actually are the folks that sponsor the Vets in Recovery through the Nebraska Innovation Studio, and that's like John Henry's is a big sponsor there. But otherwise, if there's a fly shop out there that wants to hook up with us, we'd be more than happy to get in touch with them. What we find, a lot of the sporting good places already have a thing that they're donating to. So, for example, Shields has a number of Lincoln charities that they're already contributing to, and that's all based on what they're marketing and what their store leader wanted to do. And I think that's every business that has that charitable giving, that it's somewhat controlled by the personality of whoever's in charge. But yeah, if you're a Lincoln business and you've got money that you'd like to give to a veterans cause, I have one. I can hook you up. So.
Sounds like a very good one. That was. Thank you for teaching us all about that. Now
Oh, sure.
I know we major apparel, but
Yeah,
I didn't
yeah.
really know what was
What it
behind
meant.
it. So
I do have one more question. One of my favorite Disney movies is a Goofy movie, and in the Goofy movie, he does the perfect cast. Do you have your own perfect cast that when you put it out there, you say, yeah, that's it?
Yeah, and so that happens too when you're teaching people, by the way. Like their first great cast, they'll look at you and they're like, I just killed it. That's an amazing cast. Their next cast, by the way, will never be good because they're thinking about the last cast and not the current cast. But yeah, I've been places and maybe not even gotten a fish on it. But, if you throw 100 feet of fly line, that you that's everything going well. And so when you do something like that, that's pretty good. My buddy, Kenneth Wisenhunt, who's one of my volunteers, and I, we'll go out and fish on the windiest possible days. And we were at Holmes Lake one day, and it was 25 gusts into 40. And any cast, we got out to 60 feet that day in either direction, because the wind doesn't, people think the wind helps you if you're casting with it. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't, because every cast has a back cast. And so you're always fighting the wind half of the time. And, if you get a really long cast on a day like that when the wind's just horrible, that feels like you've really accomplished something. And then you come home and you're really tired. You can't.
it's a workout. Yeah.
Yeah.
The more I think about it.
Yeah. It's certainly an upper body, shoulder, torso thing. And you'll come home and your arms will just be exhausted. And you're like, man, I did some work today.
That's good.
Well, awesome.
So, all right. Well, thank you very much, Mark, for coming on.
All right. Thanks for having me.
Mark.
I appreciate it.
Thanks, everybody.